but for everybody in the world. And that gives us an immense intrinsic value. We mean enough to God that God was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice so that we could be reconciled back to Him. That gives us value. That gives everybody value. And so we have to understand that. Everybody in the world has this value. It's very, very important that we do that because we live in a society where people are looked at like they're garbage and trash. And where people are treated like they're garbage and trash. Just because of the way they look, the way they act, the way they smell, the way they dress, because of what country they're from, because of the color of their skin, because of what car they drive, because of whether or not they have an iPhone or an Android, or whether, we have all of these divisions in our society and attitudes in our society, and we are neglecting this truth that everybody has this value. All right? It's one of the reasons why we have the abortion industry, because we have literally said those people who aren't born yet don't have the same value as everybody else does. Well, at least we did that until, a court recently just actually granted rights to the unborn babies, finally, even though he didn't mean to. He accidentally did. So, joke's on him. That's going to be taken to the Supreme Court. I can't wait for that. But anyway, so everybody has this value, and this value, okay, is why these ungodly actions that we find about and we read about in James chapter 2 is so simple. Okay, I want to point this out because this is something that applies to a lot of different areas of life. It's an attitude that we have in our country, not just in our country, honestly, around the world, because I've met people who have this attitude in different places, and I'll actually mention something here in a minute. But James chapter 2 talks about this attitude. And we have a bad habit, sometimes even as Christians, falling into this trap. Matter of fact, in James chapter 2, he's calling out Christians for falling out this trap. But I want to take a point aside and want to talk about it real quick because I feel like it's something that we really need to take and dig into. And it goes back to this attitude, this idea of everybody having this value that God's given us. James chapter 2, verse 1 through 9. It says, "My brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing, and say, you sit here in a good place, while you say to the poor man, you stand over there, or sit down at my feet, have you not then made distinctions amongst yourselves, and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man, and are not the rich ones who are not the rich the ones who oppress you, and the ones who drag you into court? Are not they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called? If you really fulfill the royal law according to the scriptures, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. Okay? So, this is what's called the sin of partiality. Okay? Now, you might be thinking of different examples. Theo, I know you see this play out at school all the time. Because I went to school, all right, I saw it played out then. And It's the sin of partiality. The Bible talks about it a lot. Okay? This is when we make the distinctions about a group of people or a person because of one thing or another. Okay, it's the sin of partiality. It's like we prefer this person over that person, or we treat this person better than we treat this person because of something about this person or something about that person. All right, it's very simple. All right, but how does this play out? Okay, it plays out in the difference between the rich and the poor. Okay. We act like rich people are better than poor people, and rich people are really good at doing this. All right, trust me. If you don't know, hang out with some rich people. Okay. As someone who was poor, I mean, I'm not saying I'm poor, okay, but I ain't rich either. All right, and I'm telling you, when we were in college, I remember. Brent and I were talking about this earlier this week, but my wife, when we were in college, we were poor. Okay, if it wasn't for student loans, we'd starve to death. But literally, we were poor, man. My wife worked for this rich lady as her personal assistant. Okay, and one day we ran by their house because she had to pick some stuff up, and I was standing there just waiting for her to get done. And the lady's husband comes in and it's like, well, if you need something to do, there's some waters in the car that need to be brought in. And I'm like, I looked at him and said, I'm good. Because I'm like, dude, just because my wife works for your wife doesn't mean I come with a package, all right? And I have value just like you do. My time is my time, just like your time is your time, and my time just as important as your time is. Just because you're a dentist and you got a lot of money doesn't mean that I'm less than you, and you get to boss me around, okay? I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. But this happens all the time in our country, all right? We see this playing out, and that is exactly the example that James gives. Okay, but this goes far beyond this. Okay, it goes beyond rich and poor. Okay, and I want you guys to kind of understand this. This also comes to I'll call it this. All right, and maybe I'm making the word up. I don't know. I'm calling it ethnicism. Okay, but most of us would probably call it racism. This is a sin. All right? This is why this is wrong. I call it ethnicism because there's one race, the human race. There's just different ethnicities. All right? Some people have a little bit more melatonin than others. All right? They're blessed by God, but they're a little bit darker than the rest of us. Okay? And the rest of us are, pasting white. Okay? I'm going to tell you, that's my Viking blood. But, that's what I'm saying. It's my Viking blood. So I said you were blessed. But this is the thing. We see this play out all the time. And we're going to see it play out in the reverse now in our country, which is kind of crazy because with critical race theory, we got this idea that all of a sudden, all white people are working bad, and everybody's a racist. You're white, you're born racist, and you can never not be a racist. I mean, that's racism. It's racism in another package is what it is. All right, it's exactly what it is. And so it's racist. And because you're basically classifying a group of people because of their color of their skin, which is the exact same thing that old school Democrat racists did back in the day. Okay, was they classified black people because of the color of their skin, or they classified Asian people. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. The reason why I bring this up right here is because this all goes back to evolutionary theory. Now it goes back to evolutionary theory. All right, if you've opened up if we got Theo's science book, okay, and we crack that sucker open to the evolutionary part of it, it's going to talk about the races of humanity. Why? Because that is an evolutionary construct invented by racist white people. I'm going to be honest about that. Who tried, based on phrenology, which is a goofball science, okay, that's been disproven scientifically. But they believe that because of the size of a white person's skull and the shape of a white person's skull, that somehow they were superior to black people and Asian people and Hispanic people. I'm dead serious, okay? I know it sounds dumb, but if you go back and you trace this crap, okay, that's the reason why they come up with this dog mess. It doesn't come from the scriptures. It comes from evolutionary theory. Creation matters. The creation account matters because it gives value to everyone and points out the fact that the evolutionary racism that has existed in our society for centuries now is simple and wrong. Okay? This, of course, has led to a lot of things. The Holocaust. All right? That is the reason why the Holocaust existed. All right? A little thing called eugenics. Okay? Which I don't know how many of y'all know anything about eugenics. The eugenics basically is the idea that they want to take and control the gene pool. All right? You have these wicked people. You want to take and try to take and eliminate unsavory things from society. And so the people who give into eugenics will have done things, even in our country. Okay, I want you to think that America is free from this because we're not. Eugenics is the reason why we have Planned Parenthood. The lady who founded Planned Parenthood was a eugenicist. She believed in this, that there were unsavory genetic traits in our society that needed to be eliminated, and so she decided she would help eliminate them by creating abortion. Exactly. And in case you're wondering what those traits are, for her, is being black. She was racist. Okay? And if you follow anything about the abortion industry, we're the leading group of people that did abortions for black people. They are decimating the population of black people through eugenics because they believe in eugenics. All right? Eugenics is the reason for the Holocaust. Some of y'all might not know that Hitler came to America, met with some prominent eugenic leaders in eugenics, and thanked them for their progress that they made in the study of eugenics. Because to him, they were his heroes. And that was the reason why he did the Holocaust. Because he believed in a superior race that he could take and do if he could eliminate all these people who were inferior. And he didn't just kill Jews in the Holocaust, he killed black people, he killed handicapped people, he killed the mentally ill. And that's exactly what they did with eugenics here in America too. They didn't kill this black people and Jewish people so much, but I mean there are some black people who were killed through the abortion industry. But they would take mentally ill people and they would experiment on them to try to take and see if they could remove, or they would just kill them. They would just disappear them. And so this is a problem that comes about. But this comes about because of the sin of partiality. It's saying these people aren't as good as these people are. We prefer these people, so we're going to eliminate these people. Now that's the sin of partiality in the extreme. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Most of us don't get to that point. All right? But this still exists and still goes on. All right? There's some other things. I'm going to put them right here, okay? I'm just finding a hole right now. That this leads to, sorry, my tap was squeezed out. Classism. Okay? The idea of the haves and have-nots, okay, or for our case, you can see this really played out in the political circle. All right? Politicians see that they're in a class above the rest of us. All right? They do. And they're wrong, okay? But this happens, and again, some of that goes back to the rich poor thing as well. But also, there's people who aren't necessarily rich poor, but they still think they're better, than everybody else. You see this play out in the caste system in India. I mean, you have people in India that are considered less than human, less valued than dogs, that aren't legally allowed to draw water from wells. They literally have to go and beg people to draw water for them, or they will be punished by the law for doing so. Okay? The caste system is jacked up. Okay? But it goes back to sin of partiality. Okay? It goes back to not recognizing the value that God has been placed into every human being. Everybody has that value. Okay? So we can keep going, okay? Thinking less of people because of the educational level that they have. All right? Oh, you didn't finish high school? Who cares? You didn't finish high school. Okay, you know what? I've met some very intelligent people who didn't finish high school, you know, and I've met some morons who had doctorate degrees. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Just because you got a lot of education, don't make it so that you're like the most educated person in the room. You have to always say.
My uncle, he's in nursing school. He's not exactly sharp as I
I see that. You maybe have a lot of education about one certain thing, but I mean, all of us have met people who are like maybe really highly educated, but they got no common sense. You know what I'm saying? You know, where they can walk after traffic, not even paying attention to anything. I mean, you know what I'm saying? That doesn't matter. Okay, but regardless, everybody has this value. Everybody has the value that God's given them. So it doesn't matter if you have that education or not. But there's this separation that happens, this sin of partiality that happens a lot of times, where you have people who are educated and they think they're better than people who aren't educated. Okay, and this happens, but it's ungodly. It's the sin of partiality. The sin of partiality plays out also in thinking less of others because of the way they look. Okay. And like I said, I know Theo's getting this, you know, he's seen this play out in schools. All right, you guys remember high school, you guys remember elementary school, you know, oh, you got cooties, okay, you know what I'm saying? And that kind of stuff. And okay, so more elementary school than it is high school. Hopefully, people aren't talking about cooties in high school. If you're still in high school saying circle, circle, dot, dot, now you got your cootie shot. We need to pray for you. But anyways, but I'm just saying, you have value, but we do need to pray for you. Okay, I'm just saying. But we see this thing where you have the popular people and the unpopular people. You've got the jocks, and you got the nerds, and you got the skaters, and the emos, or whatever else. I don't think emos exist anymore. But anyways, but you have these different separations, and it's almost back to the sin of partiality. It's the sin of partiality. It's any time we fail to recognize the intrinsic value that God has given to someone and treat them according to that value rather than something in their life. That's the sin of partiality. And the reason why I bring this up is because this is a major issue that we have in our society. And if we would go back to creation and go back and accept the truths about ourselves that God being our creator gives us, we would resolve a lot of this. When we realize that people who have, for instance, mental disabilities, that those people are created by God and they have intrinsic value and they may need help, yes, but it doesn't mean they're less human than the rest of us are. They need the respect that God demands us to give to them and the love that God demands us to give them in the gospel just as much as anybody else does. Listen, one of the most godly women I ever met in my life was severely autistic. But she loved Jesus, and she was a prayer warrior till the day she died. And so, everybody has this deep value, and we all have to treat people like they have this value. And if we want to take and stand out as the salt of the earth and the light of the world the way Jesus commanded us to as a church, if we treat people with the value that God says they have, we'll do that. Because in this world, this is not what happens, especially in America. Because we're too caught up and hung up on everything else, and we don't give people the value that they deserve. So anyways, so God has created us with immense intrinsic value. That's one of the things that Him being our creator brings us to. Everybody got this? Okay. Alright, so the last thing I want us to take and see, the last truth that God being our creator brings out for us is that we are not animals. We are a higher created being. This is very, very important we understand this. Because we have these mindsets and these philosophies in our world that circulate today that treat us as if we're just another animal. And they want to take into view our lives as less than other animals many times. Okay? This is where you get into people who are, all about, cow rights and chicken rights. And, well, usually they're about the cow rights. Nobody ever talks about chicken rights. You ever notice that? People who are all about, we gotta save the cows. You shouldn't murder cows. No one says that about chickens. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
It's animalist.
Animalist? Yeah, exactly. But no one says that about chickens. I don't know if it's their media, but or what. But no one says that about chickens. All right, and I don't know. But anyways, but we have to understand this. We are not animals. We're a higher created being. Okay. We were created separately from other animals. You remember back whenever we went through this whole entire thing, when we went through a couple of weeks back, we went through the whole days of creation. We see that as God creates all the other animals, He does this blanket creation. Let the earth, or let the skies teem with birds, let the waters teem with fish, and boom, they're created. All right. Let the earth bring forth these animals. Okay, and the animals were all created. Boom, they're created. But when it comes to creating humans, God says, let's make them in our image, and let's sit down, and then he goes down and he forms the man himself. Okay, breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, he becomes a living soul, and he creates the woman from the man, okay, molds her and shapes her himself. Okay, so we are created separately from the other animals, we're created differently from the other animals. All right. This is a big deal. God creates everything else, then He creates man. So it's very important we understand that. Another reason why we're high created beings, only mankind was created in the image of God. Okay. And that's, of course, in our memory verse, Genesis 1:26-27. God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, with birds of the heavens, and livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps over the earth. And 3:47, he said he created God in his image, or created man in his image. And so it makes it very, very plain. Okay? Only mankind was created in the image of God. All right? Like I said a minute ago. You don't see that in any other creature. All right? So we are not animals in that sense because we have this special creation that God's given to us. We also see that we're different from other animals because we're supposed to rule over those other animals. Over all the earth. God made us to do that. We see that in, of course, Genesis 1:26. And also in verse 28. And I won't read 2016, just read it, but verse 28 says that God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. We are created different. We are not animals. All right? Now, if you would closely look at it, okay, you were told that you were. All right? Of course, you were also told that, you exist because, a gorilla decided one day that he wanted to, shave his back and go to Harvard and, drive a Lincoln or something. I don't know. But we're not animals. Okay? We're something else. We're part of creation, yes, but we are created differently than other animals. We alone are created in the image of God. That gives us this higher value as well. And it's very important we understand that because we have this society, these norms in our society, these ideas in our society, that we are no more valuable than other creatures and other beings. Now, I'm not saying we need to abuse our environment, because we don't, all right? God gave, if you remember, we talked about how we're supposed to take care of the earth. God put Adam and Eve in the garden to dress it and keep it, and to take care of it. And so we have that responsibility passed on to us as humans. We live here, okay? And as stewards of God, we, of all people, should be more interested in stewarding our planet more than anybody else. We should be the best ones, okay? Honestly, the best stewards. And so that's something that we should be doing, all right? But we're not slaves to the environment, okay? We're supposed to rule over it. We're not equal with cows. We're above cows, okay? I'm saying it honestly. We're not the same level as bugs. We're above bugs, okay? You know what I'm saying? And I say that because, like we talked about last week a little bit, there are places where, like, especially California, like if you have, like I remember one time there was a guy, wildfire was approaching his house, and he went out, and I think what it was, he petitioned to take and to have a fire break dug around his house, but they wouldn't do it because there was supposedly an endangered species of beagle around his house. And so he said, screw it, he went out and dug it himself, and then he got sued because he dug up the environment of an endangered beagle. And I'm sorry, that's dumb. Okay, let's just be honest, it's dumb. It's valuing bug life over human life, and we should never do that. Okay, the Bible is very plain about that we should be valuing human life over animal life because human life is more valuable than animal life is. Now, that doesn't mean that like we're just going around just like killing monkeys or something like that. Or I'm gonna go out in the yard, I'm just gonna start shooting everything that walks. Okay, honestly, the average hunter, contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, don't believe in that either. All right, but we have to make this distinction. It's very, very important we do, because if we don't, we do not assess the value that people need, and we don't treat people the way that people need to be treated in this world. And it leads to these corrupt mentalities that are contrary to the scriptures, and that leads us, honestly, into sinful thoughts and actions. And so it's very important we understand this. God being our creator is one of the most important truths in the scriptures. And it's one that's constantly under attack. And it's constantly under attack because it is a foundational truth that Satan knows that if he can erode that in our minds, then he can take and erode so much more. And if you see how the evolutionary theory has impacted our society, you can see that he's done that. We see a lot of these things going on. I still think that a lot of the reason why we have school shootings nowadays is because we've taught people that they're accidents and that human life doesn't matter. And because they're accidents, it's survival of the fittest, okay? And so it's okay to just go ahead and wipe people out. It's kind of the mentality that people are running to. And if we taught them the truth that that God created everybody, that everybody has this immense intrinsic value, and that life matters is important, and that human life is so precious, then we have less of a chance of them going into schools and doing that. If you go back in history and you look back in the day, whenever we had Bible being taught in schools, teaching people about creation, teaching people that they were created beings, you didn't see this nonsense going on. And don't tell me it wasn't because they didn't have access to guns back then. They literally would hold gun safety classes in classes. There's pictures of the kids with rifles in the schoolroom having gun safety classes. So don't tell me they didn't have guns in schools back then. Malarkey. I remember back in high school when almost every redneck I knew came to school with a gun rack in the back of his truck with one or two guns hanging in the back of it. Okay? So, yeah, guns came to school back in the day all the time. But we didn't have people going in and shooting everybody up. All right? Why? Because we were still being taught this. I'm old enough, okay, even though really it was illegal at the time, federally, but I'm old enough to have had a Bible teacher in elementary school in the public system. So there's a difference when we're training people and teaching people, and we're failing to give them this truth. We erode their minds when it comes to the way we think about other human beings, and they begin to think it's okay to do these things. And the ones that have been bullied and poorly treated by others that have that motivation is the reason why they're going to go in and kill people. If we also taught this, they probably would never have gotten bullied. Because let's face it, bullying and treating people like garbage in school goes back to the fact that we're not assessing the value of life that we should be. So it's a big deal. Anyways, let's pray. It's going to be dismissed. God, we thank you and thank you so much. God, that you're a creator. And God, I just want to thank you that even though you can see down deep on and see that we would be rebellious people that would turn our backs on you, that would sin against you, that would break your commands and violate your commands, that you chose to create something else. And that even back then, knowing that our sin would mean a huge sacrifice on your part, you still created us. God, I thank you that not only did you create us, but you created us in your image, God. You just viewed us with so much value as human beings. Value that every human being holds. And God, I pray that as we go out as your representatives, as we saw earlier today, as your ambassadors here in this earth, I pray that you would help us to see people the way you see them. To give them that value that you give them, that we might not fall into the sin of partiality in Jesus and mistreat people because we fail to give them the value that you have given them in your creation. Help us to recognize their worth and the treatment for them. God, break that sin of partiality in our hearts, that it might not show up in the world. May we represent you well in this world.